Did you know that the whole idea of licensed games basically began with Star Trek? Back in the days when computers were usually as big as your average modern day apartment, in 1971 to be precise, a guy named Mike Mayfield developed a little text-based game based around the Enterprise destroying Klingon warships. It wasn't actually licensed or anything, but if you so happened to be looking for a point where the idea of making games based off something else got started, well, that's as good as any, innit? Now since then there's been countless Trek games of all shapes and sizes, although that really shouldn't surprise you, to be honest. What, a big science fiction franchise loved by many, particularly those of a nerdier disposition? Well, there's a pretty big correlation right there, am I right? The only difference being that a few years after the first Trek game, the makers of the show found out they could actually make quite a bit of cash in the bargain. Now Star Trek, like just about any licensed game franchise, has had to deal with a lot of shit. But on the whole, the hit ratio here is pretty high. These games pack a hell of a lot more punch than the games we saw in the Simpsons list, that's for sure. One thing that immediately strikes me about Star Trek games is how faithful to the franchise they are. Even the bad games still win true with Trek's ethos. There may be incompetence, but there's always respect. Come to think of it, that correlation between game developers and Trek fans I made a minute ago perhaps isn't just a cheap nerd joke. Because most programmers are honest when they say they don't like working on licensed games because the opportunity for any actual creativity is small. But if it's a franchise that you like or care about deeply, well then damn it, you'll do your best to make the best game you can. And Trek is pretty open to boot. Action games, exploration games, strategy, world building, you know, there's a lot here, and not much time to get through it all. So, without any further ado, let's take Captain Picard to warp speed and plot out the 10 best, or at least my favourite, Star Trek games, and well, let's make it so. Number 10. We begin with a type of game that's almost uniquely Star Trek, one that simulates bridge command. Basically, you take the chair and order people about, tell them to fire the phasers, go to warp speed, set a course, repair the engine cores, that sort of thing. Starfleet Academy does a decent job of this, but the main reason it's here is because it's quite a good production. The video shown here was quite a step up from the likes of, say, Night Trap. Games like Starfleet Academy showed that it actually was possible to stick live action footage into a video game and for it not to be shit. Although granted, Wing Commander did much the same thing a couple of years earlier, but hey ho, Wing Commander didn't have the shat. And if it's good enough for the shat, then damn it, it's good enough for me. Number 9. Now it turns out that the captain's chair is quite comfy, so we'll sit in it for a little while longer. More orders on the way. Bridge Commander is a step up from Starfleet Academy, with early noughties full 3D models replacing the almighty William Shatner. It works okay, the gameplay's alright, the command system is easy to get on with, and the space battles are exciting. Also, to be honest, the game runs a hell of a lot better on my computer than Starfleet Academy does. Because a lot of these games are old PC efforts, so if an acclaimed title doesn't appear on here, then chances are I wasn't able to get it working. Anyway, I digress. Bridge Commander is by far the best of these bridge simulator games, although I don't find them hugely engaging. Just giving out orders to fire rather than doing it myself is kinda dissatisfying. It's authentic for sure, but it don't really make for a great game. And yeah, I'm kinda shit at it too. I respect Bridge Commander, but I don't hugely enjoy it. Number 8. Now this might be a surprise to some. Voyager Elite Force is pretty damn well regarded, so what's it doing as low as number 8? Now of course I should reiterate again that the quality of this list is much higher than the last one for The Simpsons. I've got good things to say about all of these games, and I certainly think that Elite Force deserves the praise it usually gets. It's a fine game, it captures the mood of the series about as well as an FPS from the year 2000 possibly could, and even if that show happens to be the lamest one of the lot, those cutscenes are still very good indeed. It's a perfectly good FPS, and is probably even better in multiplayer. A shame I can't really do much about that now. I think though that I have Elite Force this low because FPS for me isn't really the ideal genre for Star Trek. This sounds really arsey, but I prefer something a bit more cerebral. Strategy, adventure, that kind of thing. It's still a very good FPS, but I just probably get my Trek kicks elsewhere. It's all the same to you. Number 7. And to really hammer it home, I'm putting Klingon Honor Guard ahead of the much better regarded Elite Force, because that's just the sort of arsehole that I am. Klingon Honor Guard is completely straightforward. Your play as a Klingon and the majority of your opponents are, well, other Klingons. There's a pretty big pox running through all those houses. There's a fair bit of hand-to-hand combat in this one, which suits the mood quite nicely. Oh, and you can also roll around and evade shots. And you'll need to as well, because this game is pretty damn tough. While the AI occasionally does do stupid things, they're generally quite good at avoiding all your shots. It's a cruder game, but I found it a bit spikier than Elite Force. It got my adrenaline going a little bit more, and so I give it the narrow edge. Number 6. Oh, my days, a console, finally. Now this is a game that I think has a little bit of a bad rap. Everything I said about Star Trek as an FPS could certainly be applied tenfold to Star Trek as a platformer. Jumping puzzles, phaser action, running around defusing bombs. What a load of crap. This wasn't the DS9 game people wanted at all. Where's the beef, the depression, the weary Sisko shaking his head? You won't find much of that here. However, yeah, I like it. Crossroads of Time is one of those cinematic platformer style games, you know, like Flashback, where the jumping feels a bit more grounded in reality and whatnot. And what can I say? I kinda have a soft spot for the genre. I mean, fuck, I even enjoyed Lesterly Unlikely, so this was always going to be a welcome game at Kimble Towers. As a platformer, I reckon it's worth the trouble, although I won't deny that there are better DS9 games around than this one. We'll see them later. Number 5. Okay, we're back in control of a spaceship. I greatly prefer the Starfleet command style of game to Bridge Commander's approach, because you're in charge of everything. You're doing the moving, the targeting, the firing. It's not simply a question of just giving out orders. This sort of strategic play works better for me. It's not as authentic, but it's much more gamey. And Starfleet Command, in this instance free, is pretty easy to pick up as well. Perhaps you'd take in a couple of tutorials first, but from then on it's so easy simply to just stick it on and play a battle or two. Put the Romulans and Klingons against each other perhaps, or just chuck everything into a free-for-all dogfight. Fine stuff, and one of the easiest Trekkie strategy games to get into. And considering how shit I am at strategy games in general, that's good enough for me. Just give me the lowest difficulty and the chance to smack some intergalactic class Z Cessna around with a Borg sphere, and I'm a happy guy. Number 4. Okay, this is the DS9 game that most people wanted. The Fallen is a third-person adventure where you can take your pick from Sisko, Kira and Worf and basically embark on your typical DS9 adventure. One where, as usual, everything's shit and the whole universe appears to be on the edge of destruction. Turns out infinite space ain't all it's cracked up to be. The Fallen is kinda like your typical third-person affair from the early 2000s, especially on the licensed game front. It's strong enough so that if you're a fan, the plot will carry you through easily enough. If you're not a fan, then you may not care too much for the slightly janky controls and the look. But it's still a decent game, and as far as plot goes, it's probably only beaten by the list's top title. And there's lots of decent voice acting too. Although, weirdly, everyone seems to be here aside from, of all people, Avery frickin' Brooks. Not sure why that is. It's a bit of a shame, but the game carries on regardless, and it's still very good. The best of the Deep Space Nine games. So if you're a fan of the more depressing side of Trek, then this is definitely the game for you. Number 3. The next generation got a much better 16-bit console game than DS9 did. It actually got something a lot more faithful to the franchise. Now if you're on the SNES, this is called Futures Past, but that's a dirty word around here, so we're sticking with Echoes from the Past for the Mega Drive. Echoes from the Past is actually a mixture of pretty much everything we've seen so far. The main bulk of the game lies in bridge command and diplomacy, but you've also got traditional bird's eye combat when you're duking it out with a spaceship, and the away team parts are sort of like NES's Star Trek 25th Anniversary game, only a great deal better. Everything we've seen so far seems to focus on doing one thing well. Echoes from the Past tries to mix elements together, and for the most part it manages to pull it off. The game really crackles, I think, when you do the diplomacy. Not a lot of MD games have dialogue choices, let alone ones this detailed. Talking actually feels like it matters. The only major negative is that the action can sometimes be irritating. The game does rely quite a lot on maze stages that are just infuriating, and if one of your crew members gets injured, you have to go all the way back. But this is easily the best console Star Trek game, and it's also a great deal better than the SNES version, which is always pleasing to me. Number 2. So, for all the highly advanced games we've seen so far, the original Star Trek game still came pretty damn close to the top spot. You just can't beat a classic vector game from the early 80s, can't you? Strategic Operations Simulator is all about space battles with Klingons and Romulans. You just have to clear the area as fast as you can. It's somewhat similar to the even older Star Raiders, which in turn was heavily inspired by the original Star Trek game we talked about at the start of the video. And plus you have some nice robotic voice samples, stins of music, and those neat arcade sound effects. When fins go boom, well, they go boom. What else can I say? It's simple, good, clean, golden age fun. Give it 5 minutes and it'll take you to warp speed and back again. Just don't forget to wipe up afterwards, okay? Kidding aside, this isn't quite as good as the old Star Wars arcade game, but if you've got MAME, then you should definitely boot it up. Number 1. And so, what do you know? We have a tie at the top. Mind you, they are both by the same developers, one being a sequel of the other. Interplay take the gold with 2 classic adventure titles, Star Trek 25th Anniversary and Judgment Rights. Both games put you in the shoes of the original crew. Kirk, Spock, Bones, Sulu, Uhura, they're all here. The action is split into episodes, meaning you can sort of think of these games as the unmade 4th and 5th seasons of the show. Generally speaking, an episode largely consists of a trip to a planet or station and a visit by the away team, Kirk, Spock, Bones, and a red shirt. Now the red shirt's function is to be your extra life. In other words, he'll die the first chance he gets. Now this could be bravely in a ferocious battle against a Klingon horde, or it could be because you purposefully shocked him again and again with an alien panel. Either way, the red shirt will die. The brilliance of these games lie in their absolute faithfulness to the show, in every single respect. The characters are perfectly captured. It's often said that you should spend as much time as possible in an adventure game exploring everything and getting as much detail as you can, but it's really true of this game. There's so much great dialogue between Spock and Bones in particular that you just miss if you just blitzed through it. If you have the CD versions, you'll even get their actual voices into the bargain, speaking to you in your own home. Sadly I don't, but it still reads just fine. Of the 2 games, Judgment Rights is usually considered to be the better one. It's more of the same, with much the same interface and slightly beefed up graphics, but the actual adventure aspect has been improved a great deal, with brilliant plots and less pixel hunts or infuriating adventure game logic puzzles, something that 25th Anniversary does suffer from a little. However, both games were still created with love and care by people who clearly adore Star Trek in all of its forms. I mean, gee, I bet they even love Spock's brain. Even if you're not a Star Trek fan, these games are 2 of the best non-LucasArts, non-Sierra games of the era, and you should definitely play them. And if you are a Star Trek fan, and you haven't played them, well then switch this video off and do it now. Christ, don't even wait for the ending, just go for it, man. Okay, now that the people have switched off in their droves to go and download those classics, I hope, it's time to end the video. Now I hardly need to tell you what's next, do I? The next video is the most important in the whole list, the one where, finally, we deal with the kin of the licensed game franchises. Whether you're a fan or not, this list would not exist without it. I am, of course, referring to the Spice Girls. Ha ha ha, huddy ha ha ha. God, I'd kill me. Okay, no more fucking about. It's Star Wars, it's a top 10, and it's coming up next. Not much else to say, really. Except, of course, thanks for watching, and wherever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time.